Hello and welcome back to my series called Let's Talk. I'm finally back in creation mode. We are focusing on Kentucky's counties that were named for Revolutionary War patriots as we celebrate America's 250th birthday this year. Now, last videos, we covered the first three counties, Lincoln, Jefferson, and Fayette. So if you missed those, make sure you go back and check those out so you get that front-loaded history and how we make it to the next three that we're going to be covering in the next three videos called Nelson, Mercer, and Madison. Now, one of the things that happens the last time, so you remember in 1780, Virginia creates those three counties out of Kentucky County, and the name Kentucky disappears, and we get those three counties, Lincoln, Fayette, and Jefferson. In 1782, we get some change of law. And it's actually in May of that year that Virginia passes a law creating the District of Kentucky. So the name Kentucky comes back again. We're not a state yet, but we are a district within Virginia, and they're now calling us the District of Kentucky. Well, this new law allows Kentuckians to actually create its own district courts, and that also allows Kentuckians to create their own counties without having to travel all the way to Richmond, Virginia to get approval. So this is one huge step closer to our statehood, allowing us to create our own courts and our own counties. So in 1785, Kentuckians create their very first county of their own, and they name it Nelson County. In 1786, they do that again with three more counties, creating Mercer, Bourbon, and Madison. And in my upcoming videos, we will talk about Mercer and Madison, and we'll also talk about why we're not talking about Bourbon. So you'll understand that when we get to those videos coming up next. So make sure that you subscribe my YouTube channel, follow on my Facebook page so you don't miss any of those videos. Now, this is what the map ends up looking like in 1786 when we take the counties of Lincoln, Jefferson, and Fayette, and we bust them up even more. We take some land away from those. And so this is now what the Kentucky map looks like in 1786 with those other additional new counties. Now, of course, we know that this map continues to bust up even more as we move ourselves closer to our 120 counties that we have today. And we will continue to break up that map and show that to you as we progress through our upcoming counties. Now, so our focus today is Nelson County, Kentucky, which is where Bardstown, Kentucky is located. So that helps you kind of put it on a map if you are not from that area. It, again, was established in 1785, and it was named for Thomas Nelson Jr. Now, Thomas Nelson Jr. is not a junior because of his father. He's a junior because he was named for his uncle, who was, of course, Thomas Nelson. He is considered and called Thomas Nelson Sr. Thomas Nelson Sr. was also from Yorktown, Virginia, which is where Junior was from. So I imagine that either at that time they wanted to differentiate between the two, or those labels came later as we studied history and wanted to differentiate between those two. So he's a junior, not because of his father, but because of his uncle. Now, as my notes here on the screen tell you, he was born in December 26th of 1738, as I've already said, in Yorktown. He was born to one of Virginia's very first families, which basically means influential and pretty powerful. It was actually in 1695 that the Nelson family actually comes over from England. So they have been in America quite a long time, which is what makes them so influential. He is born to William and Elizabeth Burwell Nelson. Those were his parents. And his parents expected much power and place for him in Virginia. As you can understand, again, they've been in place since 1695. So they expect pretty high expectations from Thomas. And so they set him up for that in his education. He originally receives his education from Reverend Yates of Gloucester County, Virginia. I probably said that wrong, so we're going to move on and not even try that again. So he receives his education from Reverend Yates. In 1753, they sent him to England to continue his education, where he actually graduates from Christ College at Cambridge, England. And upon his return to Virginia, he enters into the family's business, which is a mercantile business, and he becomes a leading merchant and businessman. Now, as we expect, he does move up along the way, and in 1761, he's actually elected to the Virginia House of Burgesses, which is the colonial legislature. Think of it as our senators and representatives, only this is the colonial era, so he's a Burgess. He does marry in 1762 to a young lady by the name of Lucy Grimes. They end up having, some sources say 13, some say 15 children. We do know that 2 of them died in infancy and did not make it to adulthood, which is pretty normal. It's actually quite normal that they didn't lose more children than they did. This was pretty typical for that time period. Now, in May of 1774, Governor Lord Dunmore, now remember that's our British governor, dissolves the Virginia House of Burgesses. Now, he does this as a retaliation for the protests against the Boston Port Act. So things are revving up, if you will, and they are, pushing back against the British acts, which were basically taxes. And so to take care of that, Lord Dunmore basically says, I'm just going to eliminate your government, which in the end doesn't really work for him. So basically what this allows to happen is that now Nelson can separate himself from the British. So he's no longer in the British colonial legislature because that's been dissolved. And this allows him to move and side with the Patriots. So in July of 1775, Nelson is appointed the colonel of the 2nd Virginia Infantry Regiment as we are revving up for the Revolutionary War. Now, in 1775, he is appointed colonel, but he's already been giving money to his own personal money to the army. I don't know if we have a colonial army yet, to the army, to the militia, and supplying Boston with his money. So he's been pretty into the Patriot side and pushing towards that, pushing away from the British for quite a while. In mid-1775, he's elected to the Second Continental Congress. He's filling George Washington's seat as George Washington assumes command of the Continental Army. That's when it's raised in July of 1775. So he steps into George Washington's seat in the Continental Congress. Now, when Virginia decides to, they vote on it in the government. So the Virginia government votes and they decide that they're going to have Congress. They want to propose independence. So Nelson actually carries those instructions to his colleagues in Philadelphia and states that Virginia wants to propose independence. He actually is the one that carries that to Philadelphia. It is also there that he then signs the Declaration of Independence as they work on all of that. He signs 9 spaces below our very famous John Hancock, who is very famous because he signed it so large. Now, here's the thing about Thomas Nelson that we haven't talked about yet, but Thomas Nelson has asthma. And while today that's not too terribly big of a deal, it is huge in this time period because we had no treatment for asthma. So in May of 1777, Thomas Nelson has a major asthma attack. It actually is so bad that it forces him to resign from Congress due to that poor health. Now, as asthma attacks go, they come and go. And so once he was better and back on his feet, which is in 1778, he becomes a member of the Governor's Council under Patrick Henry. And it is then that he is awarded the rank of Brigadier General, and he is elected to the lower house of legislature. So he's back in the game. In June 12th to be specific, of 1781, he is elected governor of Virginia. So his role has still been huge, and he's been moving up that ladder all along. He actually follows Thomas Jefferson in the governorship. And just as he becomes governor, Virginia is dealing with the British invading the state. And so pretty much the Virginia government basically grants Nelson almost dictatorial powers. And he then coordinates Virginia's defense against Cornwallis. So again, they've been invaded. Now he is the one who is coordinating all of those defenses to push back against Cornwallis as he invades Virginia. And this is where Nelson takes action. He actually joins George Washington and Rochambeau in order to besiege the British in his hometown of Yorktown. All right. So he then is there at Yorktown as a commanding officer. He commands the Virginia militia. He's basically in charge of a third of the American troops during this battle, which is equal to 3,000 Virginia militiamen. So again, at Yorktown, which if you've watched my previous videos, you know that Cornwallis surrenders at Yorktown, and Nelson is there when that takes place. Now, again, because of poor health, he actually has to resign from the governorship. Remember, when he was at Yorktown, he was the governor of Virginia and the commander of Virginia's militia. So he was playing both roles at that time. But all of this has flared up his asthma, and just 5 months after taking governorship, he resigns from being Virginia's governor. Sadly, the war has totally ruined his business, his mercantile business. It ruins him financially as well. He donated $2 million of his own, basically giving Virginia a personal loan of $2 million. And if you know anything of this time period, you know these men did not get paid back. And so he does not get reimbursed for a penny of this money that he has loaned to Virginia. And because that's never repaid, this pretty much leaves him broke. All right. It leaves him broke. It leaves him poor. It leaves him with a wife, and it leaves him with either 11 or 13 children. It's different depending upon which you look at. So I didn't delve any further into that. Sadly, he dies just a few years later, January 4th of 1789. And again, he's died poor and penniless. He resigns governor in 1781. He dies in 1789, just 8 years after his resignation. He dies of asthma. He is 50 years old, which it's so sad to me. Now, he gets buried in Yorktown's Grace Church. And yes, I've now noticed my typo on that. So apologize for the typo. I know how to spell Yorktown. He is actually buried in Yorktown's Grace Church, but he is buried unmarked. And the reason for that, I don't know if that was his decision or his family's decision, but by the time he dies, he owes so many people so much money because, again, he was poor. And I'm guessing he's then taking out his own loans to take care of himself and his wife and his family. So he not only dies poor, but he dies in debt. And so, again, I don't know if it's him or if it's his family, but they're concerned that that the people he owes money to will dig him up and use him basically use his body as ransom for the money that is owed to them. And so they bury him unmarked, and he is still unmarked today. Which, if you think about the role he played, it is just sad to me that we do not know where this patriot is buried. Now, Nelson County, of course, is named for him, but we also, at a point in time, also named this fort for him. This is Fort Nelson, which was built along the banks of the Ohio River as the first land fort in what would become Louisville, Kentucky. So this fort was also named for him. Now, this fort no longer exists. It is now a bunch of very large warehouse buildings there in downtown Louisville. So it no longer exists. But I do want to say that if you are interested in this little piece of history, that I did write up a post on Corn Island and Fort Nelson on my website. So you will find that at www.kentuckyhistorictravels.com. If you go to the Post by County tab, then look under Jefferson, you will find Corn Island and Fort Nelson, and you'll have a little treat there on that fort in Louisville, which basically was the beginnings of the city. So that's pretty exciting as we begin to celebrate America's 250th birthday. I want to thank you all so very much for joining me again today for another Revolutionary War Patriot. Join me next time as we cover Mercer County and the man behind the name. And I am so excited to continue to bring these videos to you. As long as you love them, I'll continue to make them. We have a lot of men to talk about that Kentucky counties are named for. So join me next time. Thank you so much for joining me today as we celebrate America's 250th birthday. Make sure that you get out and see Kentucky, and happy travels. Until next time, bye-bye.